What's someone like you doing in my house? My own son called me a parasite on Christmas Eve, standing in my mountain retreat with his wife's family, who had bought into every lie he'd fed them. They thought I was just some deranged old man ruining their perfect holiday. But as I watched my son act like he owned the home I'd built with my own hands, I knew that one phone call could turn his face ashen with dread. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from tonight. Trust me, you'll want to stick around until the end to see what that one call did to my son. Christmas Eve had come at the perfect moment. After the most disastrous year of my career, with 3 major real estate deals falling apart and clients threatening lawsuits at every turn, I needed this. Just me, my mountain retreat, and 4 days of utter silence. The winding road up to the Blue Ridge Mountains always worked wonders for my soul. Every curve took me back to the memories of building this place with my late wife, Laura, 15 years ago. She had called it our sanctuary, and after losing her to cancer 3 years ago, it had become mine alone. This lodge symbolized everything we'd dreamed of, a space where the world couldn't reach us, where business worries melted away like snow under spring's warmth. Every log, every stone was chosen with love. It was meant to be my promise of peace. That promise shattered the moment I saw the driveway. 2 unfamiliar cars parked where only my truck should be. A white Honda Pilot and a silver sedan I didn't recognize. Through my lodge windows, warm light spilled out into the cold December night. And from my car, I could hear what made my blood run cold: party music and laughter. Someone was celebrating in my house. I sat there, engine off, trying to comprehend what I was seeing. The spare key lockbox by the door hung open. Only one person knew that code, someone I trusted completely. Now that trust felt like a dagger in my chest. The heavy oak door stood ajar, warm air slipping into the winter chill. The smell hit me first: expensive wine, food, and something worse: the stench of strangers turning my private space into their personal party venue. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. 7 strangers had taken over my living room. Empty champagne bottles littered the coffee table. Someone had rearranged my furniture to make space for their celebration. But what really made my blood boil was the sight above the fireplace. My favorite photo of Laura and me had been shoved aside to make room for someone else's decorations. These weren't just trespassers. They were people who had completely taken over my home. The group was a mix: an older couple in their 60s, a younger woman in her 30s, and several others lounging around my leather furniture as if they owned the place. They were deep in animated conversation, glasses raised in some sort of toast, oblivious to my presence. That's when I saw him, standing near the stone fireplace, holding what looked like my 20-year-old bourbon, the bottle Laura gave me for our last anniversary. A man in his early 30s suddenly went still. His laughter cut off as our eyes locked across the room. The recognition was instant and devastating. For a moment, which felt like an eternity, neither of us moved. The party continued around us, but everything else faded into background noise. This wasn't just a random break-in. This wasn't some stranger who'd gotten lucky with my security code. The man standing in my living room, drinking my bourbon and treating my sanctuary like his personal playground, wasn't a stranger at all. And judging by the look of pure panic flashing across his face, he knew exactly who I was. The shock of recognition hit me like a ton of bricks. Ryan, my son, standing in my living room after almost 2 years of silence, holding my bourbon like he owned the place. I'd stopped trying to reach him 18 months ago after numerous ignored calls and texts that vanished into the void. The last time we spoke, he'd hung up on me during an argument about his mounting credit card debt. Since then, nothing. No birthday calls, no holiday greetings, not even a response when I texted him about Laura's anniversary. Now here he was in my sanctuary, looking at me like I was the problem, The silence between us stretched like a taut wire, ready to snap. Then something shifted in his expression. The initial panic turned into calculation, and that calculation hardened into something cold and deliberate. "What's a bottom feeder like you doing in my place?" The words hit me like a slap. I staggered backward, my hand instinctively reaching for the doorframe to steady myself. In all our years of disagreements, Ryan had never spoken to me with such venom, such calculated cruelty. The fact that he was doing it now, in front of strangers, made it feel as if my chest was being squeezed in a vice. The atmosphere at the party dropped instantly. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Glasses hovered in midair, and every eye in the room shifted toward us like we were actors who had suddenly stepped onto a stage neither of us had asked for. The young woman I'd noticed earlier, petite with dark hair, probably in her late 20s, immediately moved to Ryan's side. Her posture screamed protection as she placed herself slightly in front of him. "Ryan, what's going on? Who is this man?" The casual way she asked, as if I were a total stranger, made my stomach drop. How long had Ryan been lying to these people about his family? About me? The older couple exchanged worried glances. The man, distinguished with graying hair, leaned forward in his chair. The woman beside him, poised in that effortless way some people carry themselves, placed her hand on his arm with obvious concern. "I have no idea who this crazy old man is," Ryan continued, his voice growing stronger as he fed off the support of his audience. "Someone must have given him the wrong address. Sir, you need to leave before I call security." Crazy old man. My own son was calling me a crazy old man in front of strangers, denying my very existence like I was a delusional drifter who had wandered in from the cold. "Ryan," I managed, fighting to keep my voice steady despite the earthquake shaking inside me. "What are you doing here? How did you even—" His eyes flashed with something that might have been fear, quickly covered by new aggression. "I don't know how you know my name, but that doesn't give you the right to break into my house." My house? The words echoed in my head like a cruel joke. This was my sanctuary, my refuge, my memorial to Laura. Every stone in that fireplace, every beam in the ceiling, every carefully selected piece of furniture was a reminder of years of planning and love. "Your house?" The question escaped in a whisper. "That's right." Ryan's voice grew louder, more confident, as he leaned into the support of his companions. "This is family property, and you're trespassing. I suggest you leave before things get ugly." The dark-haired woman nodded emphatically. "Ryan's right. We should call the police." The older man, who had remained silent until now, suddenly spoke up. His accent carried a slight Hispanic lilt. "Ryan, wait a moment." He gestured toward me with visible confusion. "How does this man know the security code? You said only family had access to this place." Miguel's question hung in the air like the smoke from a snuffed-out candle. I watched Ryan's face, saw the flicker of panic return before he could hide it. He must have been watching the house. Ryan stammered, "These mountain areas have problems with people like him." But Miguel wasn't satisfied. "The alarm was armed when we arrived. You disarmed it yourself. How could he possibly know the code?" Miguel's question drained what little confidence Ryan had left. I watched him struggle for an explanation. "He's been stalking me," Ryan said, his voice rising. "These mountain areas attract crazy people. He probably watched me enter the code from a distance." Even Ryan seemed to realize how ridiculous that sounded. Miguel raised an eyebrow skeptically. Memorizing a 6-digit code from across a dark driveway was impossible, and everyone knew it. But Ryan wasn't done digging. "This is my family's mountain property. I inherited it from my grandfather 2 years ago." Elna, the elegant older woman, tilted her head, puzzled. "Ryan, you've never mentioned a grandfather or an inheritance." I could see the doubt creeping into their minds. These people clearly cared for Ryan, but they were starting to see the cracks in his story. Carmen, caught between loyalty and growing suspicion, spoke. Ryan wouldn't lie about something this big. But her voice wavered. Would he? Ryan's face flushed red. Why would I lie about my own property? This crazy old man is obviously trying to scam us. That was it. I'd listened to my son call me a bottom feeder, a crazy old man, and now a scammer. The sting was sharp, but determination quickly took over. I stepped forward, my voice calm despite the storm raging inside me. I'm his father. The words hit like stones dropped into still water, sending shockwaves through the group. This is my house, I went on. I built it 15 years ago with my late wife, Laura. Every beam, every stone was chosen by us. Elena's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes widening as she looked between Ryan and me, trying to piece together the truth. Miguel's gaze flickered between us, his eyes narrowing as he scanned both our faces for any sign of recognition. Leo, who had been silent up until now, finally spoke, his voice low but clear. Wait, Lawson is your last name too, isn't it? The realization hit like a thunderclap. I could see the pieces fall into place in their minds. The shared surname, the knowledge of the alarm code, the familiarity with the house Ryan had tried so hard to claim as his own. It all made sense now. Carmen's face went pale, her voice trembling as she whispered, Ryan, is this man really your father? Ryan opened his mouth, but nothing came out. The confident mask he had worn since entering the room cracked completely, leaving behind the frightened expression of someone who had been caught in a lie so big they couldn't escape it. No, he finally stammered, his voice weak. I don't know what kind of sick game this is. Miguel stepped forward, his voice cutting through the tension. If this man is lying, then calling the police should clear it all up quickly. Carmen was already pulling her phone from her pocket, her movements sharp with both anger and disbelief. That's exactly what I'm going to do, she said, her voice shaky with frustration. I could see the panic on Ryan's face as he realized that in a matter of minutes, every lie he had told would be exposed for what it was. As Carmen pressed the call button, the weight of the moment settled in. The ringing tone echoed in the silence, each chime like a countdown to the truth coming out. Ryan stood frozen, his body stiff, probably realizing that the foundation he had built his lies on was crumbling. The police arrived a short time later, their flashing lights slicing through the darkness like a blade. 3 sharp knocks on the door made everyone in the room freeze. The 2 officers stepped inside with practiced precision. The older one, stocky with graying hair, took in the scene with sharp, assessing eyes. His younger partner, alert and efficient, positioned herself where she could see everyone clearly. We received a call about a break-in, the older officer said, his tone calm but firm. What's the situation? Carmen stepped forward, pointing directly at me. This man broke into our house. He's been harassing my husband and making crazy claims about owning this property. Ryan nodded vigorously, his face flushed with both fear and desperation. He's some deranged stranger who's been stalking me, officer. I've never seen him before in my life. The casual denial from my own son hit me like a knife twisting in my gut, but I kept my composure. I'm David Miller, I said, my voice steady despite the storm in my chest. This is my property. The officer's eyes moved between Ryan and me, noting the shared last name. Can you prove that, Mr. Miller? I nodded. I have documentation in my car. I came from my lawyer's office this afternoon. We were updating some estate papers. The folder is in my briefcase. The female officer nodded. Let's take a look. I walked out to my truck, the sound of footsteps behind me. I could hear Ryan's voice growing increasingly frantic, trying to convince the officers that I was some elaborate con artist. But I knew what was in that manila folder. 15 years of legal documentation that would end his charade. When I returned, I spread the papers out on the coffee table under the officer's flashlight. Property deeds, tax records, insurance policies, building permits, and even the final inspection certificate when Laura and I had finished the lodge. The officer examined each document carefully, his flashlight scanning the official seals and signatures. These documents clearly show David Miller as the legal owner since 2009, the officer said, looking up. His gaze shifted toward Ryan, now with a mixture of disbelief and suspicion. Son, why did you claim ownership of property that doesn't belong to you? The room fell silent. I could see the color drain from the faces of the Anderson family, Elena, Miguel, Carmen, and Leo. Their expressions shifted from confusion to betrayal. Elena's hand flew to her mouth in shock. Preston, you told us this was your grandfather's property. Ryan's face flushed with embarrassment, but he still tried to defend his lies. I can explain, he began, but his voice cracked under the pressure of the truth coming out. The female officer stepped forward, her tone stern. Making false claims about property ownership is serious, especially when it involves false reports to law enforcement. The older officer nodded. Mr. Miller, your documentation is clearly in order. I apologize for the confusion. I turned toward the group, who had been treating my home like their personal venue. The officer asked, "What do you want to do about this situation?" After 18 months of silence, after being called a bottom feeder and crazy old man in my own home, after watching my son lie to people who clearly cared about him, the decision should have been easy. But as I looked at Ryan's face, seeing the boy I had raised hidden behind layers of lies and desperation, it felt like the hardest choice I'd ever had to make. The weight of that decision pressed on my shoulders as every pair of eyes in the room turned to me, waiting for my response. 32 years of fatherhood, 3 years of widowhood, and 18 months of silence had led to this moment. The officer's eyes met mine, waiting for my decision. I looked at Ryan, really looked at him. I tried to see the little boy I had raised, the boy who used to build blanket forts in this very room when we first finished the cabin. The boy who had helped me plant the oak saplings that now towered outside the windows. The boy I had promised Laura I would always protect, no matter what. I'll always take care of him, I had whispered to her during those final days when cancer was stealing her away. He'll never be alone as long as I'm alive. But now that promise felt like chains around my chest. Elena stepped forward, her composure cracking as she looked at me with distress. Mr. Miller, please. We had no idea. We're so sorry for this intrusion. Miguel nodded emphatically beside her. We would never have come here if we knew the truth. Preston told us this was his family's property, inherited from his grandfather, Elena added, her voice thick with embarrassment. We were even planning to help him financially, a $25,000 investment in his new business venture. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. $25,000. These were good people, real people. I could see it in their faces. They had been ready to hand over their life savings to my son based on his lies. The scope of Preston's deception was even worse than I had imagined. Carmen, who had been standing frozen since the officer's verification, suddenly found her voice. Preston told me his father abandoned him when he was a child, she said, her voice barely a whisper. He said you walked out and never looked back. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound could have. Not only had Preston denied my existence tonight, but he had been systematically erasing me from his life story for months, maybe years. To these people who clearly cared about him, I wasn't just absent. I was the villain in a sob story designed to win sympathy and support. You called me a bottom feeder in my own home on Christmas Eve, I said, my voice rougher than I intended. Can you explain why you told your wife that I abandoned you? Can you explain why you were planning to take $25,000 from her parents based on lies? Can you explain why you're here, drinking my bourbon, moving my wife's photographs, treating my sanctuary like your personal playground?" The officer shifted slightly, his eyes recognizing that this was a family crisis, something much deeper than simple trespassing. "Oh yeah," I continued, the realization crashing over me like cold water. "I've been enabling this behavior for years. Every time I bailed him out of trouble, every time I covered his debts, every time I made excuses for his failures, I wasn't helping him. I was creating the man who could stand in my living room and call me a parasite without blinking. Sarah hadn't asked me to enable his lies. She had asked me to take care of him, to help him become the man she knew he could be. Instead, I'd turned him into someone who could scam innocent people and deny his own father's existence. The boy I had raised was still in there somewhere, but he was buried under years of my own misguided protection. I pulled my phone from my pocket, its familiar weight offering some sense of control. The officer waited, still silent. But I realized the question was no longer just about removing these people from my property. It was about whether I was finally ready to stop enabling the man my son had become. I opened my banking app. The blue glow of the screen felt like a revelation, and with each tap, I let everyone see the truth of what I had been paying for. "The luxury apartment you live in, Ryan. $2,800 a month? I pay that. The car payments for that BMW outside? $840 monthly, also mine." I scrolled through more transactions, showing payments for health insurance, auto insurance, and renter's insurance, all under my policies, all paid by me. Ryan's voice cracked. "Dad, please, not in front of them. 3 credit cards in your name, Ryan. Current balance, $12,000. Guess who's been making the payments?" Carmen's face twisted with betrayal. "You told me your salary covered our lifestyle." The lies were unraveling faster than Ryan could come up with new ones. He stammered for explanations, but they didn't exist. I showed them all the evidence: monthly allowances, phone service, internet, utilities, all paid by me. The total I had given him annually exceeded $78,400. For 6 straight years, I had been handing him money, bailing him out, trying to protect him from consequences. Finally, I tapped the cancellation options on the phone. The apartment subsidy was canceled. Chime. The car loan payments, canceled. Chime. Credit card autopay, canceled. Chime. Insurance policies, terminated. Chime. Ryan's face drained of color. "Dad, you can't do this. How am I supposed to—" With every confirmation sound, I felt the weight lift off my chest, the worry about his next crisis, the endless cycle of bailouts and broken promises. Finally, it was over. I closed the app and put the phone away. Every face in the room stared at me with expressions ranging from shock to something that might have been respect. "That ends tonight," I said, my voice steady. The silence stretched before I delivered the words that would change everything. "Pack your belongings and leave my property. All of you. Now." Ryan opened his mouth to protest, but no words came out. His confident mask had cracked completely, and in its place was a man who had just realized his safety net had vanished forever. The Anderson family stood frozen, probably realizing how close they had come to losing $25,000 to my son's elaborate deception. Carmen glanced at me, understanding dawning that everything she had believed about her relationship with Ryan had been built on lies. The officer nodded, recognizing that sometimes justice doesn't come with handcuffs or court dates. It comes in the form of a father making the hardest decision of his life. The sound of zippers and rustling bags filled the air as the Anderson family scrambled to leave, their movements quick but reluctant. Elena folded clothes with sharp precision, barely containing her anger. Miguel gathered belongings, avoiding eye contact with Ryan. Thank God we didn't give him that money yet, Miguel whispered, his voice thick with relief. Carmen packed with fierce efficiency, throwing things into her bag and casting angry glances at Ryan, no longer the protective woman she had been earlier. Leo moved quietly, his expression reflecting a man who had just learned that everything he knew about Ryan was a lie. Dad, please. Ryan's voice cracked as he stepped toward me. Can we just talk privately? I can explain everything. I looked at him, seeing flashes of the boy who used to help me stack firewood for this fireplace, the boy who helped me plant the oak trees outside. But that boy was buried under 6 years of lies and financial dependence I had enabled. There's nothing left to discuss, I said, my voice surprising me with its finality. The officer stood by, ensuring everything proceeded smoothly despite the emotional undercurrents. Elena nodded when asked if they had everything. Miguel shouldered their suitcase. Carmen zipped her bag with a violent efficiency and slung it over her shoulder without once looking at Ryan. The family filed toward the door, reluctant but determined. Ryan lingered, one last attempt to make me see his side. Dad, I know I messed up, but we're family. You can't just... You made your choice when you called me a bottom feeder in my own home on Christmas Eve, I said, cutting him off. Ryan's face crumpled, but I had already turned away. I couldn't watch the last thread connecting me to the son I had raised snap for good. The heavy oak door closed behind them with finality, echoing through every room of the lodge. The sound of their car engine starting and tires crunching on gravel slowly faded into the December night. And then, silence. I stood surrounded by the remnants of a party I had never invited, the empty champagne bottles, half-eaten crackers, and foreign decorations left behind like a reminder of the betrayal. My sanctuary had been violated, reclaimed, and now stood in the aftermath of a family explosion years in the making. I sank into my leather chair by the fireplace, the same chair where Laura used to curl up with her books on winter evenings. The silence felt different now. Not the peaceful quiet I had come here to find, but something hollow and aching. For 32 years, I had been Preston's father. For the last 6, I had been his enabler. And tonight, I had finally become something I never thought I would be, the consequence he had to face. The weight of that realization settled over me like a heavy blanket. I had kept my promise to Laura. I had taken care of Preston, but somewhere along the way, taking care of him had turned into taking care of everything for him. I had created a man who could call his own father a bottom feeder without flinching. The fire crackled softly in the hearth, casting dancing shadows across the walls. I moved Laura's photo back above the mantel, and for the first time in years, I felt as if she was watching over me, understanding what had to be done. She had known this day would come. She had known that love sometimes meant letting go, even when it tore your heart out. I closed my eyes and let the silence wash over me, knowing that tomorrow would bring consequences. Preston would learn to stand on his own. The Andersons would process their betrayal. Carmen would decide if her marriage could survive the foundation of lies it had been built upon. But tonight, for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time. The strange peace that comes from finally doing what is right, even when it costs everything.